Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society webinar series. If you can hear me okay, if you just type for me in the questions box, a quick audio check, just want to make sure everybody can hear me all right and that we're coming in clear. I appreciate it. Just let me know if our audio is clear. Great, thank you so much, everyone. Again, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society webinar series. Today's webinar, Making Remote 3D Collaboration Easy, is sponsored by Vertex. Vertex Software's cloud-based digital twin platform fuels team collaboration by unlocking 3D data and providing aligned visuals across engineering, procurement, manufacturing, sales, marketing, service, and the supply chain. My name is Courtney McWhirter. I am your host for today. If you have any questions about the Digital Enterprise Society or getting involved with the organization, I encourage you to contact me. I'm happy to help. Digital Enterprise Society is a new nonprofit member association organized to enable the transformation of product development, design, and delivery and maintenance throughout the digital enterprise, regardless of software tools used. We are dedicated to the transformation of the manufacturing enterprise workforce. If you're not already a member of Digital Enterprise Society, I encourage you to join us. You can find more information at digitalenterprisesociety.org. We have a great discussion for you today. I encourage you to post any questions that you have in that questions box that you found when you did the audio check for me. If you have any questions, we will do a brief Q&A following the presentation today. So without further delay, I will introduce today's panelists. John Heller, Matt Hang, and Nathan Hartman. John has extensive experience in mechanical engineering, supplier collaboration, cross-functional relationship building, and procurement activities. As product marketer for Vertex Software, John leverages his extensive background in engineering and product lifecycle to best understand and communicate pain points and opportunities in manufacturing organizations. Matt Hang has over 15 years of experience in designing and building B2B cloud-based collaborative applications in manufacturing, finance, and defense. In his role at Vertex, Matt oversees the product management and product marketing teams in addition to leading initiatives on new markets and products. Matt's graduate work at the Virtual Reality Application Center focused on 3D visualizations and machine learning for mechanical and material design applications. Nathan Hartman is the Dausch Family Professor of Advanced Manufacturing and Department Head of the Department of Computer Graphics Technology at Purdue University and the Director of the Purdue University Digital Enterprise Center. Professor Hartman's research areas include the process and methodology for creating model-based definitions, examining the use of model-based definition in the product lifecycle, and developing model-based enterprise. So now I'm going to turn it over to John, and we'll get started with today's presentation.
All right, thank you, Courtney, and I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you for joining. As you will see throughout the course of the next hour or so, we do not have any slides. This will not be a death by slide hour. Rather, we want to keep it as conversational as we can, practical, and hopefully providing some tips for those that have joined us in their everyday workflows here. So again, I do want to just reiterate thank you to DES as well as to Dr. Nathan Hartman for taking the time to put this together and join Matt and myself here as we discuss some of the challenges that are currently facing us today in this world that we're living in and remote collaboration, trying to keep business moving along. Also, realigning and refocusing our efforts to help the need that is around us, particularly in the response to COVID-19. And so Nate's been very active here over the last couple of weeks and utilizing the resources that he has at Purdue. And I'd like to turn it over to Nate to kind of give us an update on what the last few weeks has looked like for you, some of the opportunities and challenges you've had as you guys have refocused some efforts to aid in the COVID-19 response.
Sure, John, thanks. We've been primarily focused on working with hospitals, healthcare systems in general, as well as some of our county and state level emergency management systems and health departments to see if we could help close some of the gaps in their supply chains around personal protective equipment and other respiratory and protective related supplies as they battle the pandemic. This is something that I think is, excuse me, is a challenge for many states. Obviously, when you watch the news, there's always seems like a rundown of what's happened in each state and the extent to which it's happening. And one of the challenges that people are running into is they can't get some of the supplies they need. And to be fair, I think some of the suppliers are having trouble even supplying some of the items that are needed. And so we have found ourselves, as have I'm sure lots of others. I have colleagues at other universities, for example, that are doing some similar things, helping their own states, and all of us are seeing this need to begin to find ways to share information faster, to find ways to share information more clearly, and obviously, it's not as university faculty and staff, for example, it's not our day job per se to make medical PPE, but yet we have a capability and capacity to do that. And so for the last several weeks, we've built a fairly large team here, about 50 people. And it's across 6 of the different academic units and 5 of the different production research labs. And so we find ourselves often sharing data in a visual form, trying to collaborate with each other by online mechanisms because we have to practice social distancing and the like. And so we are using a lot of the very same tools that companies would use during normal times to design and manufacture products, but we're using it out of necessity, in this case, to design and manufacture the personal protective equipment.
Excellent. What are can you help us understand a little bit some of the challenges you've had perhaps over the last couple of weeks when it's come to trying to spool up production quickly, making sure everyone is synced? Describe to me how that process has looked for you.
At times it's depended on the day. Some days it's worked really well. Other times it's been a bit chaotic. But that being said, everyone has had the desire to want to help. And so, you never want to turn away a volunteer in this particular instance. So what we did is we tried to establish a workflow as quickly as we could and have ideally one, but at least as few as possible, sources of truth in terms of our design data, in terms of our known good geometries and production information. We tried to establish key points of contact in each of the research groups where production is taking place. That way we didn't continue to litter everyone's inbox with messaging and so on. We tried to keep that between a number of different people. We also began to use a series of collaborative tools. We've used online teaming products. In some cases, they don't look a whole lot different than the webinar platform that we're on right now. We've used common file repositories, set up things like version control and access control, design control, so on and so forth for the items that are there, trying to separate CAD models, if you will, design models from the production data that people need, and essentially releasing production data for people. We have used some other collaborative tools that are more specific to design models and so on. And so we've tried to set this up in a way that allows us to streamline communication, because literally we've gone from a bunch of people sharing emails about how they wanted to help about 3.5 weeks ago to now being able to produce hundreds, if not a little over 1,000 of these various items per day. And so, it's not as lofty as a manufacturer who makes these things as their core product, but certainly it's not a small number either.
Right. Yep. Good. Well, I know you have a couple of items that you would like to show. If you would kind of just describe some of the things that you guys are working on right now in your facility, describe how you're able to meet some needs pretty immediately and in front of you here with some of the items that you're manufacturing.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, here's an example of a set of the glasses that we're creating. The frame here is made in one of three ways. This gray frame is made by either 3D printing or laser cutting or water jet cutting. So, there's a couple subtractive processes and one additive process. The lenses that you see here are made out of rolled plastic film, and we have roll-to-roll cutting capability in one of our labs. So it's very similar to the way traditionally newspapers were made on those roll-to-roll presses. Well, instead of putting ink on paper, imagine a laser, if you will, cutting out the flat pattern for these lenses. Right? Same thing on this face shield as well. And so the frames, though, happen to be interchangeable. So we were able to come up with a way to cut down on that. And that actually happened. The interchangeability of this all and the evaluation of the flat pattern actually happened by using some cloud-based design tools, cloud-based visualization tools. And even though all of us are only maybe within 2 miles driving distance of each other in these 6 labs, the issue is we're not supposed to come in contact with each other. So we would, we're sitting in design sorts of meetings like that, sharing models and spinning them around and, using the annotations tools to point at various things. So we eventually came up with that. It's deceptively, in some cases, deceptively complicated in the sense that geometrically that doesn't look very hard, but knowing that you can produce either by additive means or subtractive means, you get into some different discussions about, for example, the bend in the frame up here and how that attaches to the lens. And then taking these little chunks here, you can see it, the white tubing, right? All that is just white plastic tubing, but when you put it on, it helps grip up against your head. That way it doesn't fall off, and within a couple hours, we had a workable design. This particular item right here, this fitting, actually, this was a bit of an Apollo 13 moment for us. If everybody remembers that movie where the scene where the oxygen is running low in the space capsule, and they realize their scrubbers and their filters are being overloaded, and they have to essentially put one together from the materials they have on hand, but oh, by the way, one of them is square and one of them is round, right? And the flight director, Gene Kranz at the time, says in exasperation, "Tell me this is not a government operation," right? Well, it just so happens what I'm holding right here are the opposite ends of 2 ventilator canister devices that go on hazmat suits. Well, guess what? It's made by 2 different manufacturers, and the oxygen canisters are not interchangeable with the hose end as well as the end that goes into the hood on the back. And so we basically did some laser scanning and some good old-fashioned mics and calipers, and we essentially machined several dozen sets of these that essentially now make those hazmat suits and bodysuits interchangeable. And we were able to pull that off in, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours probably. But what it does is it's now, in fact, one of our local hospital folks that we've been working with came over today to pick up some other prototypes and samples of things. And we've essentially saved them probably hundreds, if not thousands of hours in terms of being able to reuse things that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to reuse.
Have you been getting feedback from those users on some of those?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, I think, is one of the one of the key things in this collaborative environment.
Right.
One of the nice things is we've been able to link them into our online cloud-based tools so that they can sit and look at the things that we're looking at, so that they can see the things we're seeing, so they can read the things we're reading. And we've been able to take some people who are not used to using those kinds of tools on an everyday basis,
Right.
and make them quite comfortable over these last couple of weeks in doing those things.
That's great.
That's fantastic. And I know, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of hours by you and the team there. And you bring up a good point. It doesn't take much from a distance standpoint to make this most easy of tasks more difficult in this environment that we're living in within remote collaboration. And I'd like to explore that a little bit further here. We've seen a huge shift here over the last few weeks to remote working, people social distancing, shelter in place, all of these terms that we're now used to hearing in the news quite often. But yet there's still this need for businesses to maintain continuity, for work to still get done. And, tasks that were easy because you were sitting, 4 feet away from somebody, now are much more difficult because of the fact that we are obviously in this remote work environment. I've heard, anecdotes, and I'd be curious to know, to hear from you guys what you've heard as well. But I've got a neighbor who I was talking to him at a safe distance, by the way, when I was out on a jog the other night. And he works in an IT department, and he was relating to me that, the first 2 to 3 weeks of them practicing social distancing and the organization moving to remote work, they spent a solid 2 to 3 weeks working through network issues, getting everybody the bandwidth, the tools that they needed to get up and running, and they're still dealing with it right now. I mean, he says his hours are through the roof. Difficulties with individuals having access to server networks, logging into the VPN. I know, Matt, you and I were talking a little bit earlier. We've even heard of stories of people having to take massive workstations home and the complications that they're going through trying to get those things set up.
Yeah, we're talking to one customer that they told everyone to, had some schedule to send everyone back to the office to pick up their workstation, to bring it home and set it up there. And so I think that there's definitely some companies that are better set up for remote work and collaboration than others, and I think everyone's just trying to figure out how we're going to get through this in the short term, and then thinking through the rest of the year, if there are second and third waves of this, like what does this look like going forward? So I think there's a lot of interesting things that we're seeing from our customer base right now.
Yep, absolutely. Nate, you mentioned, trying to get to the single source of truth. We're living in this world where there's, certainly not a lack of tools out there.
Right.
But the challenge becomes, meshing the appropriate amount of tools to create efficient workflows here. Explain a little bit, some of the thought process that you guys had to go through as you determine what workflows were needed, what tools were needed in order to create efficiencies during this remote time.
Well, I'll echo something that Matt said. Similar, we have a similar situation in some cases here at the university because we have about, I think, 8,000 or so faculty and staff that work here at the university, and by and large, much of that is still necessary since classes are going on still, even though they're being done remotely, they're being done online. There's still a part of the university, if you will, that needs to run. Not to mention, almost 45,000 students now are taking classes online when they used to take them in person. And so that's been an exercise in And persistence in some ways, I think, because it's been a challenge to take that many people. You mentioned IT infrastructure, you mentioned the kinds of tools. Not everyone is part of a course or part of a major where content like that is easily put online.
Right.
And so there has been just a lot of on the fly preparation. And so, you're talking about these workflows. I would say, to me, it sort of distills down into a couple different layers. There's a basic communication layer, sort of what we're doing now by way of this webinar, where the communication needs to be synchronous. Ideally, it would be live, but or at least within someone's view, right? We all have our cameras on right now, and one of the best practices that people recommend for working remotely, even though it does tie up some bandwidth, is use your camera, right? There's a lot of human to human interaction that helps with communication by using that. So at a basic layer, you need to have some synchronous form of communication. The next layer is an ability to somehow demonstrate or show or make a visual communications mechanism that is not, it may not necessarily be by way of a camera like we are today, but some sort of ability to share, whether it's a document, maybe it's a model, maybe it's a spreadsheet, whatever it is, whatever the information is that you need to share, the ability to share it with whomever might be in the call or in the meeting. And so, again, the simple adage of a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? The ability to show someone what it is that you're talking about is critically important. And then the third layer is some sort of asynchronous layer where information can be shared. Maybe it's an email message that is really more of a summary. People can read it at their leisure. It doesn't have to be communicated right now. Maybe there's a document repository where, end of week reports or, some other newsletter possibly is put. So those are the kinds of things that I think people need to think about, is those different layers of communication and how they work together.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I've been working with remote software teams for about 10 years now. And, I think when part of your team's remote, you just have to be more intentional than you normally are about communication.
For sure.
Thinking through designing your communication channels, like frequency, how often. Nate, like you were saying, does this need to be synchronous? Can this be asynchronous? Should this be in a messaging channel, or is this important enough that this should be in someone's inbox? There's so many communication tools available out there, and I think what we're going to find here is a lot of emergent best practices coming through. And when we're hopefully when we're out of this situation, hopefully some of these best practices will continue, right? And it's not just one off, right?
Matt, you raise an interesting point there about the intentionality or the being intentional of your communications. I mean, we've all been in meetings before, pre-pandemic, right? Where there's the main meeting, but then there might be this sidebar over here that's going on that's important. And to be fair, sometimes it is important, sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. And maybe somebody's getting clarification on whatever the main part of the meeting was. And so, that's really hard to do, obviously, if you're not sitting next to someone. And so a lot of these online communication mechanisms now, they allow for the main meeting, but there's also some kind of a chat mechanism where it could be a chat with everyone, or it could be a chat between individual people, but yet you have the ability to carry on multiple threads of a conversation. And that can also be particularly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like making sure that, it's easy to find those threads, that that they can be made accessible to others, and just all the water cooler type activities that you would have when you're all together in the same room or within that same meeting. there's a lot of conversations when the meeting ends that they even continue past that, right? And so, do you have the right messaging channels set up for that? Is that something that you're thinking about? Because there's a lot of important information that happens after those meetings, right? So.
Right.
Well, good. Well, I know as we think about collaboration during this time of social distancing, we think about businesses maintaining continuity. Certainly, it reaches farther than just engineer to engineer or engineer to supplier. We think about needs, around training, and how do we train a staff that's remote? How do we train a group of service techs, that we're trying to keep at a safe distance, bringing them on board. We also think about companies needing to maintain positive connections with their customers. And so how do companies maintain that business continuity while staying in contact with their customers? Previously, maybe they made sales calls, they visited in person. There was a weekly stop off to ensure things are going well. Well, how is that now in this world of remote, and how are companies getting around this issue of maintaining deep connections with their customers? So a lot of areas that are being impacted when it comes to the areas of remote collaboration. What I'd like to do now is shift into, Nate and Matt, you guys talked and laid out, kind of some foundations for, design reviews, for online collaboration, and some of those pieces needing to be there. One of the things that particularly here at Vertex we're enabling is the ability to bring everyone together in a visual common meeting place. Traditionally, we've seen many organizations struggle, even when they were co-located, to be able to get 3D product information out to other areas, even within the building. And certainly now that's been compounded. And so if we come back to sort of this element of a design review, and we think about the preparation that has to go into the design review, typically when we're sitting in a design review, perhaps we're sharing somebody's screen. Somebody's on a Zoom or a Skype, and you've got one person driving from a CAD standpoint and looking at the design, but there's a whole nother set of workflows that have to take place prior to getting into that standpoint here. And so I'll just demonstrate here some quick tools that Vertex has within our platform to help with this design review prep in this remote environment that we're living in here. And so let me just quickly share my screen. Okay. And hopefully everyone's able to see that. So what we've got here is a platform where organizations are able to place their 3D product data in a spot where it is accessible by anyone on any device. And you can see here, it is a web-enabled browser login. And when you're brought into the login screen here, you're brought into a collection place called a My Workspace spot. And I might point out here that there's no software that needs to be downloaded to be able to get into the Vertex platform and start collaborating with your 3D data. We are a 100% cloud-based solution, and I'll get into a little bit of the specifics on how we enable the performance to scale up and size a model and a number of users. But let's imagine that you've got some information, you're remote, and you want to put your 3D model out in an area where a group of collaborators can collaborate on it in preparation for a design review. You can bring in your information into the Vertex platform in a couple of different ways, one by clicking this import button or by APIs that we provide to be able to sync your data at your predetermined timing. And there's a couple different lists here to show you. One is you'll have all of your 3D models here that are available to you that you've imported into the Vertex platform, as well as your stories. And we talked a little bit earlier about the need to put together information in a way that is easily consumed by your collaborators. And so a story is one of those methods that the Vertex platform has, and being able to put together design information and address issues leading up to a design review. And you can see here I'm in this story, which is a collection of 3D snapshots. You can see here these aren't just static 2D images, and this story was put together to talk through a couple different design issues around this wind turbine. Got some issues here with the gearing. Another example that we could pull up here, perhaps to demonstrate the power of the platform of being able to interact with any size of model. Here I've got a submarine, and perhaps I want to put together a story to be able to collaborate with a group of individuals about some of the issues I have with, or the questions I have with space IO clearance, for example. So another one that we talk about as well is being able to stay connected to your sales team. If I were to look here at perhaps this model, you can see we've got a concept car in here. And again, to remind everyone, these are fully interactive 3D models, complete with your bill of material for what is shown visually in this model viewer. And here, as we step through these snapshots, you'll notice that we've laid out a couple of different designs of wheels and rear spoilers in the back here, as I draw your attention to that, and flipping through them again to be able to give a potential customer an idea of what a particular option might look like. Obviously, we're in this time where companies are as well trying to figure out how they can provide information to others who might be able to aid in the manufacturing of ventilators. And here would be a sample story that we've put together to illustrate how collaboration can be made easy in trying to spool up some manufacturing to be able to assist in the ventilator response as well. So multiple ways for companies to be able to collaborate and interact, to be able to relay information, to solve issues, to prepare for design reviews, and to keep business moving. So why don't I just show you real quick here how easy it is to put together a design review via a story here. I'm going to pull up this supercar, and I'll go into here to version 1, and let's step through the scenario here where I'm working to put together some information about a brake that I'm having some brake issues with. And I've got the full bill of material here, so I know that it's made by a particular supplier, so I'm able to use the metadata that came in with the 3D model to be able to search by supplier. And I will search by Wildwood. Get that in here. There he is. And now I know it's this right front caliper, so I'm going to do a show only selected to bring that into view. And there it is. Now I want to add some cross section to that, so I can come in and add cross section to this part. And I'll flip this around to a standard view. Now I can bring in some parts that are around it to start building in my context. Flip this around and I'll zoom in to the part, and you can see here that we've got some overlap between the disk and the brake assembly. So now it's a very, very easy way for me to be able to quickly find the issue that I needed and to set my context here. Now I've got this issue resolved, or not resolved, I've got this issue put together. I've collected a couple of different snapshots. I've bundled them now into this story here. I want to be able to share this out with a group of collaborators that I would like to have this issue resolved in. So I've got some slides or some snapshots that I put together here. Been able to put in some various photos, perhaps some design specs that I want my collaborators to understand within this story. And I've also now been able to set various security controls on them. So for instance, in this snapshot here, I've reduced out the geometry that strips away all of the IP that I'm concerned about them perhaps downloading onto their machine. And you can see here that it is only the bill of material shown within this model viewer that is available for them to download. And they're able to do that by hitting this export button and making the necessary geometry changes that they need to here. As well, I've noted a couple other areas where we've got some interference, and I would like some quick resolution on that. So I've set yes.
John, real quickly, I apologize. This is Courtney. We're just noticing that your computer battery is looking a little low, and we don't want to lose you if you might need to plug in.
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
Just about done here. And so now we're ready to share that out with a group of collaborators. And so I will set that up to share out with Matt. And
good catch, Courtney.
Yes. All right. And so now you've been able to see very quickly how I'm able to put together a set of snapshots that describe an issue in preparation for a design review, and I've shared this out with a collaborator that I would like to collaborate on getting these issues resolved. And so we'll turn it over to Matt, who I just shared this story with.
Yeah, how about we go over to my screen here. And, oh. Actually, can you try giving me the screen again?
I'm currently showing you as the presenter, Matt. So if you go to in the panel, you can see the share screen button.
All right. You guys have my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So John just shared out this story with me. So think about we've had some customers using this type of functionality to do in place of a physical walk around on a new product that you might instead start to do something that's a virtual walk around or a virtual walkthrough of a new design. This is my email client. I'm going to open up this email notification that I received when John shared with me. So this is very similar to other cloud-based tools out there. If I click Open Story, then I will just get hyperlinked to that 3D design review. And now I can start to, again, without a CAD or anything, on my computer, no installed software, just with a web browser. Now I can start to go around and look at the same model that John was just sharing on his screen. And so I can flip through some of these 3D snapshots here. This particular snapshot, again, everything, these are not 2D images, but 3D. I can come in here, get a new view, get a new context. I can even, add a new comment with a new snapshot from a different angle in here. Thanks, John. Please address the issue and send me the new design. So then, just like with other cloud products, that comment, then John will receive an email on his end. He can see this live update. We can continue to have a threaded discussion. And as Nate and I were talking about, there's all kinds of mediums of communication here. So if you think about, it would be really easy for me to jump on with my actual CAD package, screen share, kind of like what we're doing today, and then work on an issue. At that point, only one of us can have control over interrogation of the model, right? And so what this would allow is another medium where you could have that person on their CAD machine sharing their screen, but you could also be sharing out a 3D design review with them at the same time, so that they can also interrogate, inspect, look at new types of cross sections, get a new view on this, and look at something that they weren't thinking about beforehand, right? And so, with that, I think what you'll see, and we see this with just software development in general, along with software design, is you're constantly moving in and out of these mediums, and so we could give all this feedback to John through this medium. He could go back and update that, and let's say, for the rest of the day, he works offline on resolving some of these issues. And then once it's updated, then he can reshare out before he calls it quits for the day. I was going to say go home for the day, but this is another thing that everyone's struggling with. When do I call the end to my workday, right? So when he calls it quits for the day, then I can get that update. I can look on my I could even look on my phone before I go to bed, and read through some of those same issues. I'm gonna bring over my my mobile phone here, and so this same story you could also get on your mobile device and open that up, just as we were doing here before. Pull up all those comments that we were just making. I can continue that work stream throughout the day, rather than trying to get up another synchronous meeting that takes up everyone's time for at least a half hour to resolve something small. So with that, let's pretend John has then updated this clearance issue that we were seeing here before. So what John can do is then back in his CAD is update this particular assembly, put in the new part, make the changes, and then have those changes import, like I said, through either uploading a new revision or using our file sync utility. And then if he does make that update, and I think, John, you're gonna
I did. Yep, I just updated.
Right. So now, let's see, if I come back to this particular, now this issue that we had before is resolved. There's no longer a clearance issue with that particular assembly. So, working through these iterative design issues very, very quickly, going back and forth between these various forms of communication. Another thing that I often see people do is, this URL is unique to this particular view. So if you are using a messaging tool like Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is, you can copy and paste that particular URL, put that in a chat message, and then link directly to that as almost as if it's a 3D bookmark. That way, people are not trying to recreate the same view with the same subset of the assembly with that same cross section. Everyone can just jump to the same context very, very quickly. Yep. Anything to add to that, John?
Nope, nothing to add there. I believe we do have some time left over here to field any questions that anyone would have.
Yeah, we are getting some questions in the questions box now. First one we have here is, our IT team is slow at getting new collaboration tools up and running. What can we do in the meantime?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that we've heard that I think it's important to, regardless if it's Vertex or some other tool, I think IT teams are trying to become very agile with how their process is. And I've talked to a lot of IT administrators that are really scrambling at this time to assess in their IT portfolio, what gaps do we have, going back to these different communication channels. Do we even have the infrastructure? One thing that comes up when we get that question, we're not a traditional CAD PLM type setup. There's no on-prem deployment. You're not buying hardware. It's not going to take you 6 months to get up and going. We're basically usernames and passwords. And if you wanted to try Vertex out, which we're having a trial period through the pandemic here to get teams up and going very quickly, we're certainly willing to help you try to talk to that IT team to make sure that they know that this isn't going to be a new burden on them. Because I think that's one thing that constantly comes up to IT is like, how much of my time is this going to take? And we have things in place like, through single sign-on and user provisioning, audit logs and things like that, where we really do try to help the IT person as much as some of our end users.
We have a question for Nathan. Were you able to do simulations where the participants got to play with the controls, maybe like a VR experience of an ergonomic study or system behavior?
So generally speaking, we could do those things, although in this particular instance, we did not. It is something that takes a little bit of preparation, takes a little bit of infrastructure to put into place. And at this particular point, we just didn't have quite the time to effectively set that up.
Yeah, just curious with that. How quickly were you able to get the first prototype and get that to the user for feedback?
It was probably within, I'd say, 2 to 3 days. For example, on this fitting that I showed a little while ago, that was about 2 or 3 days. We actually have prototypes being made right now of gowns and hats and masks and foot covers and stuff. We have a few different versions that have been sewn together and constructed. In fact, just before this webinar, I had some folks pick those up and take them around to some of the various local healthcare systems. So before we cut any more pieces and before we do any more sewing, we want to see what the feedback on those is like. And so it's, feedback, I think contextually, Matt, in the context of this particular presentation, this particular webinar, I think feedback is one of those things that's important, right? It comes in many forms.
Yeah. Right.
And sometimes it comes synchronously, sometimes it comes asynchronously. But I think one of the things that is particularly interesting about the technology that that people are using in terms of virtual collaboration is that feedback is almost instantaneous, and it is highly transparent, and that is something that some people are really excited about, and sometimes people are not.
Yeah, and I think I think it's going back to these communication channels, making sure you have those set up, that feedback channel's not too noisy, that there's high quality feedback, that it's one thing you can set up that feedback channel, but then if you're not responsive to that person giving the feedback, then that whole cycle can die pretty quickly. So making sure that you have that infrastructure set up, and again, like in the age where everyone's trying to be agile and iterative and very quick, you also just need to be very intentional about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And I heard your feedback, I understand it, but this next iteration, here's how we're going to do it, right? So
thanks, guys. We have a couple more questions that have come in through the chat or in the questions box here that I want to make sure we get to. Maybe a couple questions about security. Where are the files stored, certification or certifications for highly restricted data?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Going back to that example of the workstation and the VPN and everyone working at home, maybe on not such a great internet connection. If you rely on a system of passing files around, checking files in, passing those files around from computer to computer, I think that can add a lot of load to your network and also cause potentially some security risks that you might not have if you were inside the building, right? And so I think one interesting thing that Vertex does, and we do this from both a performance and security reason, we don't pass files or geometry around to the computers that are doing any of the 3D rendering. We render everything in the cloud and just stream images over the network, so lightweight JPEGs and things like that. Very similar to how you would watch a Netflix movie, for example. Like the whole Netflix movie is not like being downloaded to your computer. You're just getting streamed images from Netflix, right? And so with that, all the files stay central to one location, and I just move my camera or create a new cross section, and I get new images back. So, from that perspective, it's more secure. And I think one other interesting thing about I think some industries have been faster to adopt cloud computing technologies than others. I think what we'll see here, you'll see a lot of IT teams start to think about instead of cloud as being a security risk, to cloud being an enabler for times like this and business continuity. And like I was saying before with the other question, we have a lot of security measures in place that also add transparency to that IT person, so that they can get the audit log of who looked at this car model that we were looking at, where were they in the world, their IP address, how long were they looking at it, what level of permission. So we can give all of that security and transparency to that administrator. And I think, again, coming through this pandemic and new adoption of remote meeting tools, messaging tools, other types of tools like Vertex, and there's a ton of other companies out there trying to help with this new normal. I think you'll start to see these IT teams and security teams start to see the benefits of cloud moving forward here.
And Matt, I would piggyback on that and say, that one of the other things that these collaborative tools allow us to do, because technology has advanced and the methods for how it presents information, is that historically, when you would want to collaborate with something, one of the first things you would often do was make a copy.
Right.
And if you made a copy and somebody else made a copy and another person made a copy, and now you got 4 or 5 different copies running around, and the ability to then merge all of whatever the interaction was back into the main pipeline of communication was always terribly difficult. In many cases, it was error prone. In many cases, it was highly inefficient. And so a lot of these digital and cloud-based technologies that, again, Vertex being one example, but the continuity of the communication thread that you have is
Absolutely.
much more robust today than it's ever has been.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think you see that with spreadsheets and Word documents as well. It's just we were even joking before this, like which document were we looking at? All of that is saved when you only have one version of the truth. There's one central repository for that, and whether that be your PDM or PLM or whatever it is, and then just make it easy to get that data out where people are not making those copies locally with their machines. Yeah, that's great, Nate.
Thanks, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and
one other question real quick. What's John's battery life at?
I plugged in, so I'm good.
Okay.
We were scared we were going to lose you there for a second. It was getting low. I was keeping an eye on it.
Thank you.
We do have a few more questions coming in, and I'm going to kind of group these two together, and hopefully I'm not wrong in doing so. But you mentioned the API integration. Does the design review information easily off-the-shelf upload with mainstream PLMs? And then in addition to that, how is licensing handled to collaborate with outside vendors and suppliers for those persons outside of the company that need to be brought into the conversation?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so we make it extremely easy, number one, to get the information into the Vertex platform. We handle all major native formats as well as the major neutral formats as well. In addition to the API syncs that we have, what we've really taken special care to is to eliminate the data transformation workflows that many companies are struggling with to get their information in a format that's easily digestible and available to others that need to see it. If I understand correctly, the second part of that question was really around the latency of people interacting with that information outside of your organization.
I think it was licensing, John. Like how does it work when working with the supplier?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you saw me demonstrate there by simply sharing out a story with Matt, that story, when it comes into somebody who doesn't have a current login to Vertex, they will be able to get into that story and be able to interact with that story free of charge. And they'll have some limited capabilities, but we really removed any of the barriers for companies who don't have a paid license to be able to get in and collaborate effectively.
Yeah. One thing I would like to add too, like, I know a lot of other companies are doing this, but we definitely want to be a part of, helping teams like Nate and other teams around the country try to address the pandemic issue. And so we have, we have a couple of programs in place if you want to try Vertex and get access to it and see if it can help through this. And then also, going forward, we've got some special pricing around this. Basically, we're offering it for free if you're part of the COVID response. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We are going to kind of wrap it up as we are at 2 o'clock. We did have a couple more questions come in. If you guys wouldn't mind sharing, I will send those additional questions over to you, and maybe you can reach out to those folks directly. We would appreciate it. So I'll get the full list of questions, and maybe if you'd like to follow up on those, again, we would greatly appreciate it. So. Sure. Thank you all again for your time today and your discussion. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Courtney. And
thanks, Nate.
And thank you, Nate.
Very welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Stay safe.
Just so our attendees are aware, all of our panelists today have been guests on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. You can find the podcast on your favorite podcast streaming platforms, and new episodes are released every Wednesday. We also encourage you to join us for our next webinar, Mastering a Virtual Interview with Barry Vince, founder of Two Roads Professional Resources. You can find Digital Enterprise Society and keep up to date on all of our offerings by following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Again, my name is Courtney McWhirter, Marketing Communications Manager with Digital Enterprise Society. If you have any questions about our webinar series, about our organization, or getting involved, please feel free to contact me. Again, Digital Enterprise Society is a new nonprofit member association organized to enable transformation of product development, design, delivery, and maintenance throughout the digital enterprise, regardless of software tools used. We are dedicated to the transformation of the manufacturing enterprise workforce. Visit us at digitalenterprisesociety.org to join and learn more. We thank you again for joining us today, and thank you to our sponsor, Vertex. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.